Hi everybody, this is Johnny from Lions in Bowties, and welcome to Pokémon Analysis. The Pokémon franchise is a historical phenomenon, both culturally and in areas of media. Culturally, if you were around in the late 90s, you'll remember the incredible popularity of the video games, the trading cards, movies, endless supplementary merchandise, and to this day you remember every word of that opening theme song. While many are still somewhat aware of the series' existence, people will be shocked to hear that the television series has endured for 800 episodes, spawned 16 feature-length movies, competitive and dynamic tournaments in both video and card game flavours, and endures as the second best-selling video game series of all time. So with all this in mind, what genre are the Pokémon video games? For a series that has endured in popularity for so long, gamers have always clumped this series in with Japanese role-playing games, or JRPGs for short. Yet, it really shares very little with that genre beyond surface elements. For the same reason we shouldn't call Portal a first-person shooter, or Oddworld Abe's Odyssey a platformer, we should not consider Pokémon to be a JRPG simply due to its surface elements. Any gaming historian can tell you that gaming genres were named haphazardly as the medium developed. While we look at the genres of film, television and books, they describe either settings or the emotions that they seek to invoke, whereas gaming is a different story. In the earlier decades of gaming, it was mostly noted for its mechanical side, so we named our genres accordingly. Do you jump a lot in it? Then it's a platformer. Are you in first person with a gun? First person shooter. This focus on mechanics has led to a lot of knockoff games that try to copy the surface elements of games, rather than the underlying reasons that made them popular in the first place, just like a lot of subpar platformers in the 90s following the likes of Mario and Sonic, or the boring copy-paste shooters of the 2000s following the likes of Halo, Gears of War and Call of Duty. In the early 2000s, Robin Haneke, Marc LeBlanc and Robert Zebeck published one of the first papers detailing how we classify game genres called Mechanics, Dynamics, Aesthetics, a formal approach to game design and game research. I'll give a brief summary of the aesthetics portion here, but I would greatly urge you to read this paper if you want a more complete understanding. The link is in the description. When we're talking about the aesthetics of play, what we mean is the underlying reasons why we play. And it's surprising just how few of these there are. The original document had 8 of them. Pretty much any video game can be seen to have a few of these elements as their key reasons for play, their core aesthetics. Even if a game has a narrative, it might not be a core reason you play, say the Mario franchise. The aesthetics outlined in the paper are as follows. Number 1. Sensation. A game that pleases one or more of your senses, a game that is strikingly beautiful on a technical or artistic level, or a game that you play over and over again for the music. Film equivalents could be the likes of Lord of the Rings, Pacific Rim, or pretty much any Roland Emmerich movie. Number 2. Fantasy. Defined as gamers make-believe, so not necessarily limited to what we usually call a fantasy setting. It could be describing Phoenix Wright as playing make-believe at being a lawyer, Halo for being a space marine, or Football Manager for being, well, a football manager. Number 3. Narrative. Gamer's drama. A game where the story is a key component in your enjoyment of the title. You can find this in games like Final Fantasy, Metal Gear, Mass Effect, or Spec Ops: The Line. Number 4. Challenge. Often mistaken for difficulty, challenge is defined as gamer's obstacle course, where the satisfaction in the player is derived by completing arbitrary challenges, such as finishing a level in Super Mario Bros. Or completing puzzles in The Legend of Zelda or Portal. Number 5. Fellowship. A game that allows you to work as a member of a group, using some sort of social framework, a driving force for team-based games like World of Warcraft, Team Fortress or Battlefield, but could also be interpreted as a key force in games like Persona 3 and 4, where socialization is promoted. I'm going to agree with the folks at Extra Credits and include competition as a separate aesthetic to Fellowship. The ability to express your dominance and superiority would be a key aspect of this aesthetic. Almost any sport would include this as an aesthetic, as well as games like Call of Duty, Street Fighter, or League of Legends. Number 6. Discovery. A game that allows you to unearth the new. Games like Sid Meier's Pirates, Metroid, Dark Souls, Xenoblade Chronicles, and the original Legend of Zelda are all games that exemplify the appeal of discovering new sections of the world, but this could also contain discoveries of new recipes in Minecraft or new sets of Magic the Gathering cards. Number 7. Expression. A game that allows you to express yourself, in games like World of Warcraft where you can choose your class and your gear, to games that rely on creativity like Mario Paint, Minecraft, or Scribblenauts. And number 8. Submission, also known as abnegation. This refers to a game that simply lets you zone out, perhaps when you've had a tough day and you just need to relax. Level grinding in RPGs is one example of this, but it can also refer to games like Farmville, Bejeweled, Tetris. All of these use abnegation as a core aesthetic. Pretty much every video game manages to engage its audience by aiming to deliver on very few specific core elements of play, usually 2, 3, maybe 4. Which brings us to the two genres of Japanese RPGs and Western RPGs. What's instantly striking here is that we define these genres by their geography. We'd never do that for other genres. This is probably due to our understanding that we usually gain different experiences from them. There are definitely exceptions to these, but this is how a typical gamer would usually differentiate between a Japanese RPG and a Western RPG. Japanese RPGs are usually defined as games that evolved from the original Dragon Quest. They tend to use turn-based battle systems, a linear leveling up system, an art style reminiscent of anime and manga, and a heavy focus on narrative. On the other hand, Western RPGs are usually more directly linked to their tabletop heritage, with real-time battles, character customization, a more personalised level-up system, and a focus on fantasy and expression. While there are definite exceptions to these rules, these are archetypal understandings of Western and Japanese role-playing games, most notably exampled by The Elder Scrolls and Final Fantasy respectively. So after all that preamble, what does this have to do with Pokémon? Well, when I looked at the underlying reasons that I play Pokémon, they didn't seem to really fit the Japanese or Western RPG archetypes. Let's take a look back to the aesthetics again. The aesthetic of sensation in the Pokémon games, as well as most other RPGs, is usually ancillary to the main attractions. The soundtrack in these games can be great, but it's usually not the main attraction to these games, and Pokémon is no exception here. The fantasy aesthetic has often been one that thrived in Western RPGs. They let you live out your personal dreams. You can go where you like, conquer where you wish, whereas in Japanese RPGs, they usually focus on a singular narrative that tends to be very linear in nature. Pokémon games have a strong fantasy appeal that allows you to go on your own adventure, free of parents or other sources of authority. Narrative is the bread and butter of a good JRPG. The drama between characters, the conflicts of interest, carefully controlled by the author, is what makes the classics so great. Now, what is the central narrative in Pokémon? While recent entries have put a greater emphasis on narrative, the main story of each Pokémon game has remained consistent. You're a child who must obtain 8 gym badges, defeat an evil organization, and become champion, possibly catching them all along the way. It's not really a narrative so much as a framework, something that can be tackled when you feel like it, something akin to more Western RPGs, or The Legend of Zelda. Challenge is a really tricky one to define in RPGs since it varies so much from game to game, particularly in the Western ones. In Japanese RPGs, the combat is primarily a puzzle. You need to figure out the best attacks for each encounter to win. For example, the zombies in Final Fantasy IV are weak to fire, so if you discover that, you'll have an easier time dealing with them. Ironically, Pokémon seems to nail this challenge aesthetic more effectively than either branch of RPG, considering the consistent type chart system. Also, collecting the gym badges can be seen as a gauge for plot progression, the arbitrary MacGuffins for a trainer's journey. While primarily single-player games, Japanese RPGs offer the idea of fellowship through the bonds between the characters in your party, how they bounce off each other and their little quirks that make you like them so much. Western RPGs can and have done this too, but Western RPGs where fellowship shines the most are in the MMO arena, where a group of friends can partake in raids together. What's interesting is that in the Pokémon games, you get both kinds of fellowship in one game. The equivalent to the party in other RPGs is your Pokémon team, and you gain a sense of camaraderie with your team. If you ever underestimate the bond that trainers and Pokémon have, just ask people who've played a Nuzlocke run. What's interesting is, even from the beginning, Pokémon has been intended to bring people together. Certain Pokémon were exclusive to different versions of the game, so you need a friend with you with a different version of the game if you want to catch them all. On the flip side, Pokémon is a great example of competition in gaming. It's easily one of Pokémon's core play aesthetics. You spend the game making your team stronger, defeating enemies and gym leaders to become the very best, like no one ever was. And once you're done with the main game, the versus multiplayer lets you clash with other people who own the game. When looking at the competitive Pokémon online community and the metagame within, there's an amazing amount of depth that you can uncover and dedication within the fanbase. Discovery has traditionally been favoured in Western RPGs, where you explore new territories, possibly finding a new cave, vista, or even a new town, allowing you to lose yourself in the game's world. On the other hand, Pokémon's element of discovery is more in the creatures in the world, discovering the types, the attacks, figuring out what species live in what areas, figuring out how they evolve. Even veterans can find new enjoyment in Pokémon by discovering previously hidden mechanics. The game is incredibly deep for a game that can be played and enjoyed by 8-year-olds. I'm going to save expression for last, so let's look at abnegation. Easy answer, they all provide this. In pretty much any RPG, you can grind a few levels, or do an easy side quest just to help you tune out. Expression in JRPGs is usually very limited. The game will let you choose your character's jobs and names maybe, but that's about it. Western RPGs, on the other hand, usually thrive on this, providing character customization, divergent skill trees, multiple classes, and possibly branching narratives. Like with other aesthetics, Pokemon's expression lies with its teams. You are the architect of your Pokemon team. You decide which species they are, the nicknames, whether they're shiny or not, which of the 4 moves they can learn, their genders, their natures and abilities. You can breed for better independent values and train for effort values. You decide what hold items they have. With this much choice and the number of variables, you pretty much never see the same team twice. So let's recap. The core aesthetics of play for Japanese RPGs are narrative and abnegation. For Western RPGs, they are fantasy, discovery, expression, and abnegation. And for Pokémon, they are fellowship, competition, expression, and abnegation. Huh. Well, that's interesting. When you look at the core aesthetics of play, Pokémon doesn't really match up with either type of role-playing game as we understand them. Perhaps this should have been obvious from the start, but Pokémon might belong to its own genre in terms of video games. While looking at these play aesthetics, I'd say Pokémon has the most in common with collectible trading card games like Magic the Gathering and Yu-Gi-Oh! You trade and battle cards with each other, and your deck is an expression of the type of player that you are. It's almost like Pokémon is a trading card game in an RPG engine. Well, I guess that would make Pokémon the world's most popular TCG RPG. Maybe a TRPG for short. I'm sure someone could come up with a better name from that, but hey, TRPG. Anyway, if you're still with me, first off, pat yourself on the back. I want to give a huge thanks to Extra Credits for providing part of the inspiration for this video, and to Rue from Clan of the Grey Wolf for his excellent retrospective on the history of video game RPGs. If you found this video interesting, then please sound off in the comments. Let me know what you think about Pokemon and its genre, and possibly click the like and subscribe button. This is Johnny from Lions in Bowties, and I look forward to hearing from you.